I'm stuck! I can't move!
Just breathe, Sarah. I've got you.
I can see them. Run.
The story begins with three best friends, Sarah, Beth, and Juno, who share a passion for extreme sports and outdoor adventures. On a bright and sunny afternoon, they are navigating a rushing mountain river in a rubber raft, riding the white water rapids with skilled precision. On the quiet shore of the river, Sarah's husband Paul and their sweet young daughter Jessica stand watching them, waving enthusiastically and cheering as the women successfully guide the raft through the turbulent water. The air is full of laughter and joy, representing a time when Sarah's life was completely whole and untroubled. After finishing their river adventure, the family packs up their gear and loads it into their car to head back home. As they drive down the quiet road, Sarah sits in the passenger seat trying to dry her wet hair with a towel. She looks over at her husband Paul, who is holding the steering wheel with a strange, heavy quietness on his face. Sensing that something is wrong, Sarah gently asks him if everything is all right, noticing a subtle distance in his eyes. Paul turns toward her, forces a small, reassuring smile, and tells her that everything is completely fine and that he is just feeling tired from the long drive. But only a fraction of a second later, their peaceful world vanishes forever. Without any warning, a heavy delivery van coming from the opposite direction swerves wildly out of control and crashes head-on into their car at incredible speed. The impact is monstrous, shattering glass and crushing the frame of the vehicle in an instant. A long, sharp iron rod carried on top of the van snaps loose, tearing through the windshield of the car like a spear. In a horrific split second, the iron bar pierces straight through the cabin, killing Sarah's husband and her little girl instantly right before her eyes. Sarah is knocked unconscious by the violent blow, slipping into deep darkness. Sometime later, Sarah opens her eyes in a cold, sterile hospital room. Her vision is blurry, and the rhythmic, high-pitched beep of a heart monitor echoes in her ears. At first, she clings to the desperate hope that the terrifying crash was nothing more than an awful, vivid nightmare. But as the nurses rush to her side and the harsh reality settles in, the unbearable truth strikes her with full force. She is the only person who survived the crash. Her loving husband and her darling daughter are dead, taken away from her in a single brutal second. A full year passes after the tragedy, but time does not heal the deep wound in Sarah's heart. Traumatized, isolated, and drowned in overwhelming grief, she struggles every single day just to find a reason to keep living. Seeing her friend decaying in darkness, her compassionate friend Beth decides that Sarah needs a change of environment to step out of her grief and rejoin the world. Beth convinces Sarah to join her on an outdoor adventure trip, organizing a getaway deep in North America's Appalachian Mountains. To make it a grand reunion, they invite 4 of their other close friends. Juno, who organized the trip, along with Rebecca, Sam, and a wild, adrenaline-seeking girl named Holly. The 6 women meet up in the rugged mountain wilderness, aiming to spend a few days bonding, reconnecting, and conquering new physical challenges. On their very first night, the 6 women stay together in a rustic wooden cabin nestled among towering pine trees. They sit around a warm fireplace, drinking wine, sharing jokes, and trying to create a cheerful atmosphere. Yet, despite the smiles and laughter of her friends, Sarah remains visibly distant and hollow inside. Whenever the conversation naturally drifts toward topics like family, children, or home, Sarah grows quiet, her mind immediately slipping back to the memory of her lost husband and child. Even when she goes to sleep that night, rest offers no escape. The horrifying crash replays in her dreams with terrifying clarity, the sound of twisting metal, the shattering windshield, and the iron rod piercing through the glass toward her family. She wakes up gasping for air, trembling in the dark. Her friends notice her distress and try their best to comfort her, hoping that the physical challenge of the upcoming expedition will help take her mind off her endless pain. The next morning, the group prepares their gear, packing heavy ropes, climbing harnesses, carabiners, flashlights, and helmet lamps. They hike deep into the dense, foggy mountain forest, following Juno toward their destination. After a long trek through the thick trees, they arrive at a massive, dark hole in the ground, the mouth of an underground cavern yawning open in the middle of the woods. The cavern looks imposing and dark, but the women are all experienced adventurers, so they do not hesitate. They secure their heavy ropes to nearby trees and begin rappelling one by one into the pitch-black abyss. As they descend into the deep stone chamber, the temperature drops dramatically and the air grows cold and damp. At first, everything appears to be a standard, thrilling caving expedition. But as they begin exploring the rocky passages, strange and unsettling details begin to emerge. Sarah shines her headlight across a tall stone wall and stops in her tracks. Marked across the rough rock surface are dark, dried stains that look disturbingly like bloody claw marks left by a wild animal. Meanwhile, Rebecca, who is carefully checking their path against an official caving guidebook and map, begins to feel deeply suspicious. The underground chambers, narrow corridors, and stone formations they are walking through look nothing like the detailed layout printed in her guide. Despite these glaring red flags and an unmistakable sense of foreboding, no one suggests turning back, and the group continues pushing deeper into the unknown darkness. As they descend further into the bowels of the earth, the environment becomes increasingly hostile and suffocating. The pathways shrink into extremely narrow tunnels where they are forced to crawl on their bellies through wet, freezing mud, squeezed tightly between jagged rock ceilings and floors. The claustrophobic atmosphere raises everyone's heart rate, but for Sarah, the psychological pressure is far worse. The absolute darkness and heavy silence awaken her internal trauma. Deep inside the echoes of the cave, she begins to hallucinate, distinctly hearing the phantom laughter and distant cries of her deceased daughter echoing through the stone walls. Holly tries to calm her down, assuring her that in deep, enclosed spaces like this, it is common for the mind to play tricks and create auditory illusions. Yet, the experience leaves Sarah deeply shaken. The group reaches an exceptionally tight stone crawlspace that they must squeeze through sequentially. Sarah takes the lead, wiggling her body through the narrow gap. But midway through the passage, her large backpack catches tightly between the low ceiling and the rock floor. She tries to push forward, but she is completely wedged. She attempts to pull back, but her body will not budge. Overwhelming panic surges through her as the claustrophobic dread takes complete control. Seeing her friend spiraling into terror, Beth immediately crawls into the tight space behind her, speaking in a calm, steady voice to help Sarah control her breathing and unbuckle her heavy pack straps. Just as Sarah unhooks the bag and wriggles free, the entire tunnel suddenly begins to tremble violently. Heavy stone slabs overhead fracture under immense pressure, and a massive cave-in occurs. Boulders and debris crash down with roaring thunder, filling the passage with thick dust and sealing the tunnel completely behind them. The women manage to escape the immediate collapse without losing their lives, but when the dust settles, they are met with a horrifying reality. The entrance through which they descended into the cave is completely buried under tons of solid rock, cutting off their only known way back to the surface. Panic explodes among the group. They turn to the guidebook, hoping to find alternative emergency exits marked on the official map. But at that exact moment, Juno is forced to confess a terrible, selfish secret. She reveals that she did not bring them to the well-mapped tourist cave listed in the guidebook at all. Instead, she deliberately led them into a completely uncharted, undiscovered cave system hidden deep in the forest. Juno admits that she kept this a secret because she wanted their group to be the very first human beings to explore the cavern, so they could claim the discovery and name the cave system after themselves. The gravity of her betrayal hits everyone like a physical blow. Because Juno lied about their location, no rescue team, park ranger, or family member knows where they actually are. Out in the real world, everyone believes they are miles away in a completely different cave system. With their entrance blocked by tons of collapsed stone and no rescue coming, the women realize they have no choice but to push deeper into the unexplored darkness, hoping against hope that there might be another natural exit somewhere further along the subterranean network. With no way back, the group moves forward into the dark, reaching a massive vertical drop that leads into a deep lower chamber. They set up their ropes and begin rappelling down the steep cliff face. As Juno descends along the stone wall, her flashlight illuminates a rusted iron piton hammered firmly into the rock face. The discovery brings a brief moment of shock. The heavy layer of rust on the iron nail indicates that someone else entered this cave system over 100 years ago, proving that they are not the first people to set foot inside. After the entire team reaches the floor of the lower chamber, Juno remembers that some essential climbing gear was left behind at the top of the cliff. Knowing they might need every bit of equipment to survive, she decides to climb back up to retrieve it. But as she pulls herself up the rock face, her foot slips on the slick stone. She falls backward, slamming violently against the wall. Seeing her friend plummeting, Rebecca instinctively grabs the safety rope with her bare hands, taking the full brunt of Juno's weight. Rebecca manages to hold on and save Juno from a fatal fall, but the friction of the rope cuts her hands badly. Determined to find an exit, the women press on through the damp passages until they come across ancient cave art painted on a smooth wall section. The primitive drawings appear to have been made thousands of years ago by ancient human ancestors, depicting figures moving toward a secondary opening that leads out to trees and sky. The discovery fills the group with a renewed spark of hope, suggesting that an alternate path to the surface really does exist. Spurred on by excitement, Holly rushes ahead of the group into the dark, eager to find the exit. In the distance, she spots a faint, shimmering light and assumes it is natural sunlight breaking through a hole in the cave roof. She runs toward it without caution, but her foot misses its footing on the edge of a hidden precipice. Holly plunges down a deep, jagged pit. When her friends reach the edge and shine their lights down, they realize that the shimmering light was not sunlight at all, but rather the reflective sheen of shiny mineral deposits on the rocks that had tricked her eyes. Holly survives the fall, but the impact shatters her leg horribly. Her broken tibia bone punctures clean through her flesh and pants, exposing raw bone to the air. Her agonizing screams echo wildly throughout the cavern halls. With no medical supplies, painkillers, or doctors available, her friends are forced to hold her down while manually snapping her broken leg back into alignment. They build a crude splint using their climbing ice picks and wooden sticks found in the cave, binding her leg tightly to stabilize the severe injury. While the group is fully occupied treating Holly's traumatic wound, Sarah wanders a short distance away into an adjacent passage, drawn by an uneasy feeling. In the dim light of her torch, she senses a presence lurking nearby in the shadows. For a terrifying fraction of a second, her light catches the outline of a pale, grotesque, humanoid figure watching her from the dark. Startled, Sarah hurries back to the group and tells them what she saw, but her friends, believing she is still struggling with trauma and grief hallucinations, dismiss her claim and assume her mind is playing tricks on her again. Shortly after, the entire group gathers their gear and moves forward together, carrying the injured Holly. As they step into a vast, cathedral-like stone chamber, their boots crunch against something brittle on the ground. When they lower their lights, their hearts stop in horror. The floor of the chamber is covered in a massive, towering pile of crushed animal and human bones, a graveyard created by a ferocious predator. Realizing they are standing inside a feeding lair, the women panic. To scan the pitch-black corners of the chamber, Sam turns on her digital video camcorder and switches the display screen to infrared night vision mode. She slowly pans the camera across the dark room. Suddenly, on the small green screen, a terrifying creature appears standing just inches away from them. It is a pale, hairless, monstrous humanoid creature with sunken, milky eyes, large bat-like ears, and razor-sharp teeth, a subterranean monster known as a crawler. Before anyone can react, the creature scuttles at blinding speed up the vertical cave wall and disappears onto the ceiling. Now, there is no doubt that Sarah was telling the truth. Terrified, the women try to retreat, but the sound of their movements triggers a sudden, violent ambush. The crawler drops from the ceiling directly onto Holly, tearing her throat open with its bare teeth in a single brutal attack. Within seconds, Holly is killed, and the monster begins dragging her bloody corpse away into the pitch-black depths. Refusing to let her friend be consumed, Juno draws her sharp climbing ice pick and charges at the creature in a blind rage. As she lunges forward, a second crawler emerges from the darkness and attacks Juno from behind. A desperate, life-or-death fight breaks out. Juno struggles violently against the monster, swinging her ice pick repeatedly until she manages to drive the sharp steel point deep into the creature's skull, killing it on the spot. Adrenaline surging and heart pounding in complete panic, Juno breathes heavily in the dark. Suddenly, she hears the sound of someone approaching rapidly behind her. Expecting another monster, Juno reacts purely on survival instinct, spinning around and wildly swinging her ice pick with full force into the dark. A sickening sound echoes through the cave. The sharp point of the ice pick embeds itself deeply into human flesh, straight into the neck of her friend Beth, who had just rushed over to help her. Beth collapses to the stone floor, gasping for air as blood spurts from her neck wound. She clutches Juno's jacket, her eyes wide with betrayal and agony, softly pleading with Juno not to leave her alone to die in the dark. But Juno, completely paralyzed by shock, horror, and guilt over what she has just done, loses her mind. Instead of helping her dying friend, Juno steps backward into the shadows and flees, leaving Beth lying helplessly in her own blood as the darkness swallows them both. Meanwhile, in the chaotic aftermath of the monster's initial attack, Sarah tries to run for her life, but she slips on the wet rocks and tumbles into a deep stone pit. Her head slams hard against a rock as she falls, knocking her unconscious. When Sarah finally regains consciousness at the bottom of the pit, her head throbs with pain. Sitting nearby in the dirt is the dropped video camcorder, its green night vision screen still glowing. Sarah quietly picks up the camera and uses the screen to view her pitch-black surroundings. Through the green lens, she sees a sight that freezes the blood in her veins. A short distance away, several pale crawlers have gathered around Holly's corpse, tearing her body apart and devouring her flesh like a pack of wild animals. As Sarah watches in absolute terror, one of the pale creatures slowly wanders away from the feast and crawls directly toward her. The monster stops just centimeters from Sarah's face. Through the camera screen, Sarah stares directly at its milky, blind eyes and sharp, blood-smeared teeth. The creature tilts its head, its nostrils flaring as it sniffs the air right next to her skin. Sarah holds her breath completely, staying as still as a statue, not moving a single muscle. After a few agonizing seconds, a distant noise echoes down the tunnel, and the creature instantly turns and scuttles toward the sound. In that terrifying moment, Sarah unlocks the creature's crucial weakness. The crawlers are completely blind from living in absolute darkness for generations, and they hunt their prey relying entirely on hearing and sound. On the other side of the cavern network, Sam and Rebecca come to the exact same realization about the monster's blindness. Hiding behind a large stone boulder, they hold their breath as a pale crawler slowly walks right past them, completely unaware of their presence. But just as the creature is about to leave the area, the digital alarm on Sam's wristwatch suddenly begins to beep loudly. The monster instantly stops and snaps its head toward the sound. Realizing the danger, Sam reacts with incredible speed, unbuckling her watch and throwing it far across the chamber into a pile of loose rocks. The watch hits the ground, continue to beep, and the crawler dashes toward the noise at full speed, allowing Sam and Rebecca to silently escape into the shadows. Meanwhile, Sarah explores her isolated pit and finds an old, rusted oil lamp left behind by miners or explorers who had entered the cave decades ago. Finding a small amount of usable fuel still left inside the reservoir, she lights the lamp, creating a soft, warm glow of light that allows her to navigate the dark tunnels safely. Elsewhere in the cave, Sam and Rebecca are creeping silently through a wide passage, trying desperately to find a way out, when another aggressive crawler drops from above and corners them. Just as the creature prepares to strike, Juno suddenly appears from the darkness, wielding her ice pick with fierce determination. Without wasting a second, Juno lunges at the beast, driving her weapon deep into its body and killing it after a short, intense struggle. The successful kill brings a brief moment of hope to the surviving women, proving that these monstrous creatures are not immortal and can be killed with weapons and courage. However, as Juno, Sam, and Rebecca attempt to regroup, Sarah is making her way through a quiet, remote section of the cave. There, lying on the cold stone, she finds Beth, who is still barely alive, suffering in terrible agony from the wound in her neck. Sarah rushes to her friend's side, cradling her head. In a faint, broken voice, Beth reveals the horrific truth. It was Juno who stabbed her in the neck with the ice pick and then callously abandoned her to die alone in the dark. To prove her words, Beth hands Sarah a unique pendant that she managed to tear off Juno's neck during the struggle. Overwhelmed by unbearable pain and knowing she has no chance of surviving her injuries, Beth begs Sarah to put an end to her suffering before the monsters find her again. Sarah breaks down in tears, hesitant to kill her dear friend. But seeing the immense agony in Beth's eyes, Sarah realizes that ending her life is the ultimate act of mercy. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, Sarah lifts a heavy stone and strikes Beth, ending her pain forever. Just moments after Beth dies, a young, juvenile crawler springs out from a nearby crevice and attacks Sarah. But Sarah is no longer the frightened, grief-stricken woman who entered the cave. Fueled by grief, heartbreak, and pure adrenaline, Sarah turns on the young creature, gouging its eyes and snapping its neck without hesitation. Hearing the death cries of her young, a massive mother crawler rushes into the chamber and lunges at Sarah in a blind rage. A ferocious, bloody brawl breaks out as the two roll across the stone floor, eventually tumbling over an edge and falling into a deep pit filled with stagnant water and blood. Covered in crimson, Sarah searches the floor of the pit, grabs a sharp, jagged bone, and drives it straight into the mother crawler's eye socket, killing it instantly. Another adult crawler approaches, but Sarah leaps forward, bashing its head repeatedly with a sharp bone until it stops moving. Standing amidst the corpses of the monsters, covered from head to toe in blood, Sarah lets out a primal, blood-curdling scream that echoes throughout the subterranean depths. Her fear is completely gone, replaced by a ruthless primal drive to survive at any cost. Meanwhile, Juno, Sam, and Rebecca are cornered by a large pack of crawlers. Realizing that hiding is no longer an option, Juno decides to take the fight directly to the monsters. Screaming a battle cry, she charges forward into the horde, initiating a bloody clash. In the middle of the chaotic battle, Sam spots a deep, wide chasm that offers a potential route towards safety. The only way across is a thin rope anchored over the pit, but the distance is far and the drop is lethal. Desperate to escape, Sam hooks herself to the line and begins pulling herself across the void. But as she hangs suspended over the dark pit, a crawler drops onto her from the ceiling above, slashing her throat open. Bleeding heavily and gasping for air, Sam pulls a small pocket knife from her belt and stabs the monster repeatedly in the chest until the creature loses its grip, sending both Sam and the beast falling into the roaring underground river at the bottom of the chasm. Moments later, Rebecca is grabbed from behind by another beast and dragged into the darkness, where she is brutally killed. Seeing both of her companions die, Juno leaps into the chasm, lands in the shallow water below, finishes off the monster that attacked Sam, and manages to scale the far wall back up to solid ground. As she pulls herself up, she turns around and finds Sarah standing in the darkness, soaked in blood and holding an ice pick. The two surviving women stand face to face, the atmosphere thick with tension. Without revealing what she knows, Sarah joins Juno as they push forward together to find an exit. Soon, 3 crawlers block their path, but working together with ruthless efficiency, Sarah and Juno fight off the beasts, killing all 3 in a brutal display of combat. Once the last monster falls dead, Sarah turns to Juno and looks her dead in the eye. In a cold, calm voice, Sarah reveals that she found Beth before she died and knows the complete, horrific truth about how Juno stabbed her and left her to die. Juno's face pales with shock and guilt, knowing there is no excuse she can offer. Taking advantage of Juno's silence, Sarah takes swift and merciless revenge. She raises her ice pick and drives it deep into Juno's leg, shattering her knee joint and crippling her on the spot. As Juno collapses to the ground screaming in agony, Sarah turns her back and runs away into the darkness, leaving Juno helpless as the screeching sounds of an approaching horde of crawlers echo from all sides to consume her. Sarah runs through the twisting, pitch-black tunnels with every ounce of strength left in her body. In her frantic effort to escape, she slips on the whetstone and slides down a steep slope, tumbling headfirst into another deep pit filled with rotting animal bones. Bruised and battered, she forces herself to stand up. As she looks up toward the ceiling of the high cavern, she spots a faint beam of natural, pale sunlight breaking through a narrow crack in the rocks above. Driven by a final surge of hope, Sarah begins clawing her way up the massive pile of bones, digging her hands into the loose rock and earth until she reaches the narrow opening. She squeezes her body through the gap and bursts out into the fresh air, tumbling onto the soft green grass of the mountain forest above. Sunlight hits her face, and the fresh scent of the woods fills her lungs. Without stopping to celebrate, Sarah sprints through the dense trees, her heart pounding as she searches for their parked vehicle. She reaches the road, climbs into her car, turns the key, and slams her foot on the gas pedal, speeding down the winding mountain road away from the cursed cavern. After driving a long distance down the highway, far away from the dangerous woods, Sarah finally pulls the car over to the side of the road. Safe at last, the immense physical and emotional trauma completely crushes her spirit. She rests her head against the steering wheel and bursts into uncontrollable, hysterical tears. Her hands tremble violently, and her chest heaves as she gasps for air, completely overwhelmed by the loss of all her friends and the nightmare she barely survived. But as she sits there crying in the quiet car, a chilling feeling creeps over her. She slowly turns her head to look at the empty passenger seat beside her. There, sitting in the shadow, is the bloody, horrific hallucination of Juno staring straight back at her, proving that even though Sarah escaped the dark cave, the haunting psychological nightmare of what happened deep underground will follow her for the rest of her life.